Hello and welcome to MEE Live. I'm Matilda Mallinson. It's Thursday, the 28th of May, 2026. Today, we speak to the Flotilla activist in Ben Gvir's video and look at Trump's latest plot twist on Iran. Peace in exchange for the Abraham Accords. We'll try to make this make sense. First up, the day's top stories. An Israeli strike on a residential building in Gaza City has killed 10 people, including 4 children. According to the Israeli army, the attack targeted senior leaders in Hamas. The Palestinian movement has yet to issue a statement. And in the West Bank, Eid was marked with settler violence. A disturbing viral video shows an Israeli settler beating a dog belonging to a Palestinian family in Masafer Yatta, Hebron. In another video of the same man, he can be seen shoving a Palestinian mother to the ground with her young child in her arms. Tensions between the US and Iran spiked once again after the US struck at targets near the Iran's Bandar Abbas airport. Iran retaliated with strikes on an American airbase in Kuwait. The two countries have repeatedly exchanged fire in and around the Strait of Hormuz, even as peace negotiations have continued. This morning, Iran expressed solidarity with Oman after US President Donald Trump threatened to blow up the country if it supports Tehran in charging fees for passage through the strait. Yet, the epicenter of regional violence remains focused on southern Lebanon. Israel carried out another wave of strikes on Wednesday, killing at least 16 people and wounding nearly 60. Residents of the south were also faced with new evacuation orders. Israel's army first began forcibly evacuating the population a few weeks ago. It has created a zone of occupation where residential buildings have been destroyed and military outposts built up. Despite a nominal ceasefire being in place, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to crush Hezbollah on Tuesday. He said the army would expand its ground operations beyond the current so-called yellow line. Next up, getting aid to Gaza. When Itamar Ben Gvir, Israel's national security minister, recorded and published that video, analysts say he probably did so with his voters at home in mind. He probably also meant it to deter foreign civilians from joining future flotillas to Gaza. But he may not have been bargaining on global condemnation of Israel's handling of the civilians on board for the first time in a series of violent interceptions. Leaders and ambassadors of states closely allied with Israel spoke publicly against the visible conditions inside Israeli prisons and the behavior of the man in charge of them. Earlier this month, hundreds of activists were detained by armed Israeli naval commandos while trying to deliver aid to Gaza by boat. They were trying to carry aid consisting of food, baby formula and medical aid for Palestinians in Gaza, where most of the population is living in dire conditions, despite a ceasefire having formally been in place since October. Now, the woman that you can see being brutalized in the start of Ben Gvir's video, with Ben Gvir encouraging those throwing her to the ground, is Catriona Graham, one of the Irish participants on board. She joins us now. Catriona, welcome to MEE Live. Now, as shocking as that video surely was, here at Middle East Eye, and this will be true for many of our viewers and readers, we sadly see far worse video content of Israeli prisons and of Ben Gvir's self-documented actions on a fairly regular basis. Were you surprised that it was this video that caused such global outrage?
Unfortunately, I think we're all very aware of the racist system that we are trying to fight against and struggle against as part of the movement and the struggle for Palestinian liberation. So while it is always positive to see condemnation of Israel and Israel's actions, I think it is unsurprising that it is a video where this kind of violence is being shown, this kind of harm and this tone and narrative of humiliation is being done to European and worldwide citizens, that this suddenly gets condemnation from international governments. But as you say, we are very aware that this kind of action has been taken by Ben Gvir many, many times against Palestinian detainees, and we have not seen the same kind of condemnation. And what is done to people of Palestine in detention is far, far worse than anything we experienced. So just because of the tone and the color of our skin, we are seeing this condemnation that should have happened many, many years ago.
Nevertheless, this did cause condemnation, and it was not least because of that shot of you being brutalised while the man in charge, Ben Gvir, gleefully encourages it. Can you share with us what you were feeling in that moment? Why did you shout, "Free Palestine"? Did you understand the risk that you were taking?
So in that moment, there was about 10 of us from the flotilla and a line of commandos in front of us, and then a ring of commandos around Ben Gvir. So I was quite aware of the risk and the potential for hard consequences of taking some kind of action. But for me, it's very important that we as citizens of the world take any opportunity that we can to speak truth to power. And knowing the harm that this man, as part of the Israeli system, has caused to so many millions of people in Gaza, in Palestine, and across the world, I don't think it would be acceptable to stay silent if there is any possibility of using the privilege that I have to try to disrupt this man's peace. I think that we need to do whatever we can, and unfortunately, as citizens, we can only do so much, and we are doing what we can do.
Did you, as part of that, sorry, I just have to, as part of that, did you know that he was filming? Did you see that this could be a moment that was shared beyond the walls of that detention centre?
I did see some cameras, and I saw that he was speaking to cameras, but I would never have thought that it would be voluntarily shared. I think it speaks to the hubris that they have around being in this bubble in Israeli media, having this very strong propaganda machine, that it's possible they forget what other kinds of eyes are going to take from seeing content like this. But unfortunately, because of the call out that we've seen from the international community, the rest of the Knesset, the rest of the Israeli leadership only tried to scapegoat Ben Gvir, and it was more about the tone of the video than it was about the torture and abuse, both of Flotilla participants and Palestinian detainees.
Yeah, there was very widespread condemnation, and among those commenting was your Prime Minister, Michal Martin. He said on X that he was appalled at the shocking behaviour of Ben Gvir. With all of the caveats that you have described, does this diplomatic backlash constitute at least a victory for the flotilla?
For me, victory comes with impact, and it comes with impact for the people in Gaza, for the people across Palestine. So this is some kind of progress. It is a window of opportunity. But for me, I will not see anything as true victory until we have seen situation on the ground changing. So while these words of condemnation, while seeing governments calling in the Israeli ambassadors to have meetings, this is something, it's not nothing. But what has to happen next is actual measures. We need to see Israel isolated in the international space. We need to see sanctions. We need to see real systems finally. So for me, there is no victory until we see proper, true Palestinian liberation.
And shortly on the show, we will be speaking to and hearing from Palestinians in Gaza about the reality on the ground right now. Look, I want to talk to you about Netanyahu's response to Ben Gvir's video. Amid all this condemnation, the Israeli Prime Minister said that these are not in line with Israel's values, these actions of Ben Gvir. What do you think of that?
I think it is very clear what the values of Israel are. Violence is absolutely inherent to the core operating system of the Israeli state. If it wasn't for the kinds of violence and dehumanization that they perpetrate against the people of Palestine day in, day out for decades now, then the Israeli state would not be able to be upheld. And speaking about Israeli values, when it comes to the tone of a video where we have seen very similar videos being shown from Israeli detention centers where Ben Gvir is undertaking to humiliate Palestinian people who are held in horrific conditions, who show in times signs of torture that far worse than what we experienced. And yet there's no condemnation there. There's no speaking about a betrayal of Israeli values there. So it also shows not only the violence that is inherent to the Israeli system, but also the deep-seated racism, because suddenly when it's white people and white bodies that are being being shown to be tortured, to be humiliated, that is against Israeli values. But if it's black and brown bodies, that is absolutely par for the course and acceptable and even celebrated.
Now, an aspect of that treatment which has not been commented on by these leaders or Ben Gvir is sexual violence. Global Summit Flotilla organisers said that there were at least 15 reports of sexual violence made by participants against Israeli authorities. I want to understand how this sort of started to emerge. Did first-hand accounts begin to emerge while you were all in detention? And how were these handled by the group?
So this was actually the second kidnapping that took place as part of this flotilla mission. The first kidnapping was off the coast of Greece. And unfortunately, already after that kidnapping, immediately there were some reports and disclosures of sexual abuse and of rape. And then this escalated with a higher proportion coming out of this kidnapping. So it's these moments in detention, it's very hard to find space with each other, but all that you have is that connection. So wherever it's possible that we can speak to each other. I mean, the night that we had in Ketziot, in the prison in occupied Palestine, we were moved over the course of the night through 4 different cells. So it was some opportunity to see each other and to connect and hear news and stories of people's experiences. So at one point, I was in a cell with 2 women who had been on the other prison boat while we were on the prison boats for 2 nights. And that was the first time that we, from my boat, heard about the extent of the violence, the beatings, the assaults, the torture that was perpetrated against our comrades on that boat. So it is moments for connection, it's moments for solace, but then it takes time to put the pieces back together afterwards. I know that on that second prison boat, they basically had to set up, the medics and doctors that were there, set up basically 24/7 triage spaces because of the extent of the violence, the harms, the beatings, the broken bones, the assaults that had been experienced. And that was the first time that they started to be able to put together the scale of what had been going on. And part of that was because as they called for support after people had broken bones, etc., concussions, there was no response from the IOF. They did not offer medical support, medical treatment. So there's this staging progress as we start to get more information and start to get the full picture of how we can support each other. Even if you're handcuffed, you can try and lean against each other, something to find some kind of support. And I think for many of us, it brought home the deep harm of our Palestinian comrades who go through these experiences but are left in complete isolation. I mean, we know this whole time it is extremely likely that we're going to be there for a couple of days, that we will get out, that we will be able to hug our family, our friends, that we will be able to speak out about our experiences, draw attention to it, that we can try to have some possibility of accountability take place. But unfortunately, that is not the reality for our Palestinian comrades.
Did you see any Palestinian detainees or any signs of the presence of Palestinian detainees while you were in Israeli detention?
So both last mission and this mission, we didn't see any Palestinian detainees in Ketziot, but we did see signs on the walls of messages from Palestinian people who had been there before. In the last mission, in a few cells, we managed to find some prayer beads, which all of these things, messages written on the walls, prayer beads, little signs of the life and continuation of life, continuity of life between people in these cells, again, deepens that connection. And so in one of the cells that we were in, we saw dates on the wall. So somebody had written that they had been held in that cell for 10 years and had been released taken out from that cell just a few days before we were put into it. And the message was that they didn't know in being removed if they were about to be freed or moved to another cell, to another space in the prison. So this brings home the uncertainty that people go through, the lack of access to information, the lack of news, the lack of access to the outside world. So we carry those little pieces with us for sure. And I know one of the comrades managed to remember the name of somebody written on the wall, spoke about this online, and a woman in Gaza has put out a video response saying that she had heard no news of her husband for many years and that it was his name and likely it was him that had written that message.
Oh my goodness, wow.
All these little moments are just so important.
Yeah. Now, as we speak, Catriona, there was also an overland humanitarian mission seeking to get aid to Gaza through Egypt. It has now had to conclude its attempt after facing obstructions in Libya, where 10 of the participants were detained. Can you give us any update about their status?
So we know that the Italian consul has been able to have contact with the Italian citizens there and has managed to improve the conditions for all 10. We are calling on their immediate release, and we are hoping to see their release as soon as possible.
Catriona Graham, thank you so much for your time. Now, in response to the flotilla's efforts to get aid to Gaza, Israel says that this is futile and has described Gaza as flooded with aid. The Foreign Ministry said that more than 1.5 million tons of aid had entered the territory over the past 7 months. MEE's own reporting paints a different picture. Many Palestinians in Gaza were unable to celebrate Eid for the 3rd year in a row amid ongoing attacks, aid restrictions, and widespread displacement in the Strip. Since the war began, over 90% of Gaza's livestock sector has been destroyed, and Israel blocks the entry of live animals into the enclave, worsening food insecurity for Gaza's residents. Uncertainty around the entry of aid then causes prices to skyrocket, meaning Palestinians are struggling to secure basic food items, let alone the goods needed to celebrate Eid. MEE was on the ground.
غزة أغلى مكان في العالم كله في الأضاحي خاصة الشمال. اليوم هذا الخروف بده زي $4000 من 5 ل4 ل6 وبصل 10 في ال100 كيلو بده $10000.
حق البقر يقارب من 35 ل 40000 دولار وقتها. كل المزارعين اتدمروا وانتكبوا وخربت مصالحهم. اليوم أصبحوا فاقدين عمل.
إحنا من أكبر المزارع في قطاع غزة، بس في منطقة شرق السجاعية في الخط الأصفر. إحنا من المزارع الكبيرة اللي تدمرت في القطاع، في الأبقار والعجول والأغنام. هذا قبل الحرب بقى يعني سعره من 180 من 800 شيكل ل 900 شيكل، $300. لقيتها زي من $4000 ل $5000 ل 10 في وصل، يعني ال 100 كيلو. وهذه الاسعار ما عمرنا يعني ما شفنا زيها في كل العالم. فيش اسعار الا في غزه زي هيك. في مصر يعني بنسال بقى من الخروف ال 50 60 كيلو ب $250 ب $200، بس عندنا الاسعار غاليه. البقره ان كانت موجوده انباعت بقره ب 100000 شيكل، يعني $29000 و$30000. ولا مزرعه بقر ولا مزرعه غنم ولا اي حاجه، كله طمه شامل. كانت الأضحى كتير ضحى، احنا بقينا نذبح بالألف راس في مزرعتنا. اليوم ما فيش ولا أي حاجة بنذبح. المزارعين كلها اللي في الشمال انتكبت.
الأضحية هي أول شيء شعيرة من شعائر الإسلام، لكن نحن في شعب غزة نبكي ونتباكى على حالنا. أنا كان عندي 3 مزارع ولا حاجة عندي هالوقت. أنا سواح في الشارع، أنا سواح، أنا وأولادي في الشارع، وكل المزارعين بشكل عام من الشمال للجنوب. كل المزارعين اتدمروا وانتكبوا وخربت مصالحهم. اليوم أصبحوا فاقدين عمل. قبل الحرب في الموسم هذا كنا يعني أنا مثلا بحكي عن نفسي كنت أذبح 200 عجل و400 خروف أو 500 خروف. اليوم تذبحش 5 خرفان. ليش؟ سعر الخروف عالي جدا، من 5000 6000 ل $10000 هو وزنه. البقر مش موجود، العجول الأبقار مش موجودة. حق البقر يقارب من 35 ل 40000 دولار وقتها.
Now on to the wider regional war. Trump is demanding many Arab nations normalize ties with Israel as a condition for peace with Iran. The US president wrote a lengthy Truth Social post on Monday saying, after all the work done by the United States to try and pull this very complex puzzle together, it should be mandatory that all of these countries at a minimum simultaneously sign onto the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords are an agreement first brokered by Trump in 2020 to establish diplomatic relations between Israel and nearby nations. The first to sign on were the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, which broke a long-standing taboo and became the first Arab states to recognize Israel in a quarter of a century. Morocco, Sudan, and Kazakhstan followed suit. The accords are often criticized for undermining the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, which set prerequisites for relations with Israel, prerequisites that are no closer to being realized. These include a full withdrawal of Israeli troops from occupied territories, the establishment of a Palestinian state, and a just settlement for Palestinian refugees. Pakistan swiftly rejected Trump's proposal. Otherwise, it has been met with silence. So let's find out what the other countries are thinking. Hala, Rharrit, Rharrit was the Arabic language spokesperson for the US State Department before she became the first US diplomat to resign over the war on Gaza. Hala, welcome to MEE Live. Tell us, how have Arab countries targeted in Trump's post taken his ultimatum?
Quite honestly, first of all, thank you for having me. They've taken it as an embarrassment, to be quite frank. To be honest, this is absolute blackmail in public. I mean, when we're talking about the US president coercing and mandating that regional allies decide to go into the Abraham Accords, these are not behind the scenes conversations. This was him at the White House demanding this. And if they don't agree, what will happen? He's saying they don't get a deal. What does it mean for regional countries here if they don't get a deal? It means that the US and Israel go back to war with Iran. They start striking Iran. And then what happens? Iran starts striking these countries, whether it's Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. That is absolute blackmail. The reason why these countries in the region are getting hit in the first place is because there are US air bases here. Now, this used to be means of so-called protection, but the reality is that it's an absolute liability. Now, it's not only just a liability, but they're stuck as pawns in Israel's game, while the US is backing Israel in trying to actually make them a target. So as you mentioned, Matilda, it's been mostly quiet. Pakistan is the only country that outright said no. But I think the others right now don't know what to do because it really is an existential threat for the countries of the region.
Now, in particular, Trump said Saudi Arabia and Qatar should immediately sign the agreements and everybody else should follow suit. How likely is that to happen? I think Saudi Arabia in particular, we're curious about. How likely is that to happen?
I don't think it's likely at all to happen. And I think this is actually Netanyahu's game, because he knows that Saudi Arabia is not going to sign on to the Abraham Accords now. It will be domestically extremely difficult. Also, there are rivalries between Saudi Arabia and the UAE with regards to the Abraham Accords that they are very familiar with. Saudi Arabia is not going to do that at this point. Qatar has been hit by Israel. Qatar has been hit by Iran. They've been hit by both sides. There's no way, especially after 2 years of an ongoing genocide in Gaza, that either of those two countries are going to sign the Abraham Accords. Also, it's by means of coercion, and I'll repeat the word blackmail. It's not going to happen. But the goal, I don't think the goal for Netanyahu is that they actually sign on to the Abraham Accords. I think he probably sold it to Trump as, oh, this would be a historic win for you. You'd be able to do a win. But he knows very well that there's no way that's going to happen. So what happens is that there's just instability. The deal is not reached. There's no diplomatic solution. And it's just perpetual instability in the region with all of this kinetic movement and fights back and forth like we had today. And at the end of the day, Israel's winning because then Netanyahu gets to continue the onslaught in Gaza and the onslaught in Lebanon while the world looks away.
I mean, that's sort of the elephant in the room. The Abraham Accords typically, have hinged on conditions to do with Palestine. And as you say, bombardment in Palestine has escalated. It has also escalated by Israel in Lebanon. Trump didn't even mention Palestine in his demands. Does he think he can write Palestine out of the Abraham Accords?
I mean, this has been the criticism of the Abraham Accords from the very beginning, right? Initially, at its outset, I think it was sold as a means of getting a two-state solution. You normalize with Israel towards a path for a Palestinian state, but that clearly hasn't happened, and quite the contrary has happened. Not only has there not been a path to a Palestinian state, but there's been an ongoing genocide, a genocide that is not ending. I mean, I think we all woke up yesterday, which was Eid, it's a celebratory day, and instead of waking up to try to celebrate the Eid holidays, we all woke up to the most horrific and gruesome images of bombardments on civilians in Gaza. It's not stopping, and today the news from Netanyahu that he has ordered the IDF to take over 70% of the Gaza Strip. I mean, the genocide is ongoing, so it's very clear that even the Abraham Accords, quote unquote, as it was originally promoted in the first Trump administration is nothing to the effect of what it is today. At this point, it's a blackmail game to try to continue the conflict, to try to ensure that the countries in the region are basically stuck between a rock and a hard place, and that a diplomatic solution is not reached. The goal is perpetual instability, because that, again, I'm going to repeat, works in Israel's favor. It does not work in the United States' favor, nor does it work in the regional countries' favor whatsoever.
Now, Trump's Truth Social post also mentioned that Iran could join the accords. This is despite the decades of hostility. Is that worth us discussing as a prospect here?
I mean, the level of delusion, it's, as a former diplomat, and I served in the State Department for 18 years, it's just between that and yesterday he threatened to bomb Oman. I'm just going to say it's American diplomacy, or the semblance of whatever remained of American diplomacy, is practically dead in the region. I mean, it makes no sense. First of all, the State Department is gutted. There are no more experts there whatsoever. And so I think literally there's a delusion in the White House, and whatever he's being fed, he's repeating. But obviously that's never going to happen. And again, I'll say the goal, I think, is to make him look or think like he's the winner. But at the end of the day, I think it's just going to continue to prolong the conflict.
Let's do a hypothetical, right? With the Abraham Accords, Trump makes it sound simple. Everyone signs the accords and peace will reign. Say these states do agree and they do sign the Abraham Accords. Could that achieve stability and prosperity in the region?
An accord does not ensure that. You have to have an end to systematic oppression of the Palestinians. You have to have an end to an apartheid regime. You have to have an end to an ongoing genocide, to an ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. It requires absolute isolation of the state of Israel the way it is today, just like we had isolation of apartheid South Africa. Before we're able to do that, then we're not going to be able to have a Palestinian state. You also have to have not an extremist right government leading Israel. You have to have people that actually want peace on the Israeli side. There are peacemakers in Israel, and those voices have to be elevated. And as long as they're not, then we have these extremist genociders that all their aim is to do is to exterminate Palestinians. The Abraham Accords is just a means of coercion.
And finally, just as you are yourself in the region, can you tell me how people are feeling as we see this escalatory language, as we see, the fragile ceasefire really start to fragment? How are people feeling? Is there a fear of the resumption of full-scale warfare?
Absolutely. People are absolutely on edge. I mean, you wake up to a different tweet every morning, not knowing if there's going to be peace or war. And at this point, both sides have said that they're going to target civilian infrastructure. So if this starts again, Trump has already reiterated multiple times that he's going to hit Iran's desalination plants, that he's going to hit Iran's power grid, and that Iran in turn is going to retaliate and do the same to the Gulf countries. I don't think the world completely grasps what that means in desert countries. If you hit desalination plants, many of these countries in the region become uninhabitable within days. We're talking about a humanitarian catastrophe that we have not witnessed in this part of the world in a very long time. And I'm talking about this even with the genocide in Gaza, right? The world is not grasping. And the fact that we are teetering on this every single day as if it's normal, as if this is normalized. And I think I have to go, as someone who served in the region for almost 2 decades in the State Department, it is almost as if wars in the Middle East have been so normalized. People are just so used to people in this part of the world getting bombed. But the reality is that tragedy is tragedy. These mothers feel as much as mothers in Ukraine or in the United States or anywhere else. But also, and critically for the West, I want to stress this war is not going to only be a Middle Eastern war if it starts again. The global economy is going to face serious consequences that the West, Europe is not ready to handle whatsoever. So again, we all have to do our part, because it's clear that the White House is delusional and we're literally on the brink of it every single day with all of the rhetoric coming out of the White House.
Hala, Rharrit, thank you so much for your insights and your time. Now, Trump's decision to make the Abraham Accords a condition for peace reflect a general consistency over what he set out to achieve when initiating war with Iran. The US president has offered mixed rationale, ranging from preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon to destroying its conventional military capabilities to securing regime change as a whole. His updates on progress are similarly inconsistent. After claiming this weekend that a peace deal was largely negotiated, he later insisted the US was in no rush and authorized strikes on his rival. The peace deal currently under discussion would extend the shaky ceasefire for 60 days. Iran would reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for sanctions waiver on oil sales. Iran's nuclear program would be left for later discussion, and that remains a major sticking point, along with Tehran's insistence on controlling the Strait of Hormuz in the long term and Israel's ongoing attacks on Lebanon. Now, into this matrix, Trump has added normalization with Israel, a diplomatic issue that has eluded US presidents since Israel was first founded. So why does he think this is a good idea? Here to help us understand Washington's viewpoint is Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Aaron, welcome to MEE Live. Can you explain what lies behind Trump's somewhat confusing bid to tie peace in Iran to the Abraham Accords?
I'm sorry, I don't think I got the first part of that question. Tying the Abraham Accords to the Iran deal?
How do we understand Trump's decision to do this? What do you think motivated Trump?
You've been watching this president in Trump 1.0, and you've now seen him almost in the first 2 years of his presidency. I think the answer has to do with his sense of grandiosity on one hand and his sense of insecurity on the other. I think he understands perhaps that the war of choice he launched has now turned into what I call a flawed, quote unquote, peace of necessity. And the reality is the agreement that will be reached will be far below what the administration initially set out to do. Cut ties with proxies, restrict ballistic missiles, regime change. He now confronts a situation where the two things he needs to essentially achieve, reopening the straits without paying a price on terms that the U.S. and the international community can accept on one hand, and number two, trying to impose enough restrictions on Iran's enrichment capacity to justify this as a success. So I think he understands both those things are going to be difficult to achieve, so he's loaded onto them an unrealistic notion of basically expanding the Iran deal to include expansion of the Abraham Accords. And I think it's simply a misreading of where the Gulf is right now. If with the exception of the Emiratis, who have doubled down and clearly see much of their future as tethered both to Israel and the U.S., the other Gulf states, the Omanis, the Qataris, the Bahrainis already joined the Abraham Accords, but the Saudis in particular have no interest in tethering themselves to an Israeli government that is annexing the West Bank, probably ramping up for a major military operation in Gaza, and still occupies parts of Lebanon. So I think this was an idea more appropriate to a galaxy far, far away rather than to the realities back here on planet Earth.
If that's the case, then this really throws a spanner in the peace progress. And I wondered is Trump bowing to pressure from within his party to do exactly that? I mean, there's been a lot of pushback from Republicans about the alleged progress of peace negotiations. He made his Truth Social post on US Memorial Day as he was facing criticism from, for example, US Senator Lindsey Graham, who wrote on X, if it's perceived that the region had a deal with Iran that allows the regime to survive, we will have poured gasoline on the conflicts in Lebanon and Iraq. Senator Ted Cruz called a peace deal a disastrous mistake. Is this him bowing to pressure from the Republican Party to essentially slow down and raise the stakes of the peace negotiations?
Well, if this were a serious issue, and we're treating it as if it is a serious issue, it's not a serious issue. It's not going to stop assuming the terms are acceptable to Iran and the US, it is not going to stop creating an agreement. And number two, it will not stop, because it isn't serious and it cannot be implemented, criticism from members of the Republican Party and others who will argue that Trump, far from weakening and emboldening the regime, has essentially strengthened it. This is a hard situation for this president to spin his way out of.
So this is delusional? Sorry. Is this symbolic from Trump or just delusional?
I think like mice in a maze, the media, and I would probably, since I'm in the public conversation, I guess I'd have to include myself here. He's got, like mice in a maze, he has everyone running around trying to analyze seriously and take seriously his latest social media posts. But they're not serious. He was going to turn Gaza into the Riviera. Whatever happened to that?
So you think this will just disappear?
He was going to annex Greenland. Whatever happened to that? He was going to solve the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Whatever happened to that? So we are witting and willing dupes in his gaslighting.
Okay.
And anyone who spends more than a minute or two trying to figure out what Donald Trump meant by this or that is being taken in. And he's doing exactly what he wants all of us to
Everyone stop watching. We're all wasting our time. I suppose, okay, another analysis that has come out of those discussions is that Trump is trying to get Netanyahu to play ball, right? Israel has criticized progress in the peace negotiations. It's continually jeopardizing those negotiations by bombing Lebanon. Did Trump raise the Abraham Accords to entice Netanyahu to play ball?
Yeah, I can't stress this point strongly enough. When I worked for administrations from Jimmy Carter to Bush 43, okay? And I followed closely both Obama and Biden. No American president has ever said publicly to an Israeli about an Israeli prime minister that Benjamin Netanyahu will do what I want him to do. You can dig out the quote. It's almost exact. Trump has enormous leverage over this man because the most important event that is going to occur in his political life is not Iran, it's not Lebanon, it's not Gaza, it's not the West Bank. It's elections. And Netanyahu is vulnerable. He needs Trump to be an active campaigner in his reelection. So, just to put a cap on this, if negotiations between the US and Iran lead to what you and I, normal humans presumably, would call a good deal for both sides, and the Iranians say to Trump, look, we need a ceasefire in Lebanon. And if you can get me that, we can have an agreement. Trump's going to pick up the phone and he's going to tell Netanyahu what to do. And guess what? He's going to do it.
Wow. And so then tell us, in all of this, where is Palestine? Because while the states that Trump mentions have not said, oh, great, we're going to sign up to the Abraham Accords, none of them have also come out and said, well, hey, there's a big sticking point here, and that is what's happening in Palestine.
Well, in large part because, frankly, if you asked me what to do, the only useful deployment of the phrase river to the sea is to describe the problem of what do you do with the 15 to 16 million humans, just over 10 million Israelis, including 2 million Palestinian citizens of Israel, who suffer systemic discrimination, and Palestinians on the West Bank, in Gaza, and in East Jerusalem. What to do about this problem? And I worked on this for most of my professional life, not succeeding, I might add. If you ask me right now, what is realistic, feasible, I couldn't come up with an answer. And key Arab states know it. Look, as far as the Arab states and the Palestinian issue are concerned, let's make one thing unmistakably clear. And frankly, maybe you have an answer, I don't. In the wake of October 7th and Hamas's indiscriminate killing of civilians, the sexual predation, the mutilation, the taking of hostages, the killing of hostages, the Israelis launched a military campaign. to prosecute their war against Hamas, and they killed, even if you deduct 20,000 of the 70+ thousand Palestinians who have died, let's say there were 25,000 Hamas fighters. The Arab world, in the face of this disaster, some call it genocide, Israel's treaty partners did nothing. Israel's Abraham Accord partners did nothing to impose significant costs or consequences on the U.S. or Israel. You tell me why that was.
Well,
and then you can see, then maybe you can see and answer your own question. To what degree are key Arab states willing and able to stand up, forget in defense of Palestine, they're willing to stand up to redeem Palestine? And frankly, my read on this, particularly watching the Emiratis behave, is the answer is absolutely nothing. They've done nothing, and they probably won't do nothing. So I don't know. I would agree with your point that the Saudis will not agree to any kind of normalization agreement without something credible and serious from the Israelis on the Palestinian issue. And frankly, I can't see, as we approach Israeli elections, the Israelis are not going to make any decisions along those lines. And they're probably, before we came on, I just saw a media post. Netanyahu has now ordered the IDF to expand the area of Gaza under Israeli control from 60% to 70%. The Israelis are ramping up, in my judgment, for a major military operation in the area that Hamas controls, the 30 to 47%, where roughly 2 million Palestinians reside. 1.5 million, I might add, displaced from their original homes. This is coming, unless Trump says no, between now and September.
Well, as much as I would like to attempt to answer that very unsolvable, difficult question, I'm told you have a hard out at 5:40, which means I'm sadly going to have to let you go. Aaron David Miller.
It's been a great conversation, and anytime, just reach out. Happy to come back to chat further.
Thank you so much. It has really been a pleasure having. The whole team was very excited to get you on, so I'm sure we'll take you up on that offer.
I hope I didn't break too much crockery, and I didn't mean to appear to be abrupt or overly cynical. It's just that I think we have to look at the world the way it is if we have any hope of trying to reshape it to the way we want it to be.
I totally agree. Aaron David Miller,
take care.
Thank you so much. Now, finally, if you aren't already a member of Middle East Eye's YouTube, what are you doing? You get access to exclusive content while supporting the independent journalism of MEE, your eye on the ground. This week, our members have been watching Nabi Bulo, LA Times' Middle East bureau chief, who spoke to journalist Rana Natur about Israel's deployment of advanced AI-driven targeting systems and surveillance in Lebanon. Here's a preview.
Well, so honestly, I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and not because of what happened with the subject of the story, Ahmed Turmus, but because of a previous situation involving this really massive Israeli strike on a village in Lebanon's north. Now, this was a Christian village, but the target was Israel said it was a Hezbollah person, but in that strike, the entire family was killed. And when I was talking to people, and this will get a bit in the weeds, but I'll explain why. The target, or I should say, the person, who was supposed to be the target of the strike, he was supposedly seen driving, through several villages beforehand before he stopped and parked in this area, right? And we had seen Israel in the past, be able to sort of do these very, very pinpoint strikes, to the level of even basically hitting people on the highway. So I got to thinking as to how come this person wasn't killed on the highway in his car, because he was obviously a Hezbollah member, right? He might not have been a combatant, but he was a member. And this sort of just, started in my head this idea, right, that the Israelis were probably after several forms of confirmation that this was the person, right? And I knew from before, from other reporting elsewhere in Gaza, that this had been, this was obviously a standard thing in warfare for quite some time now, where you have a situation of using drones and data, etc. and you as the analyst or drone operator would use that information, fuse it to determine if this is the target or not. But we had read how AI had sort of supercharged all this. And that got me to thinking, and from there I reached out to various people and talked to various people, including several who now unfortunately, have been out of touch. And I will hope they're okay. But these are people who basically acted as whistleblowers, they were working with defense industry companies, and they were quite worried about what they were seeing. And so they were happy to talk to me. But, unfortunately, I've lost contact with both of them, I have to say. And then, a few months later, this story of Ahmed Turmus came up. And this really showed up on social media. And the fact is, it's a horrific situation where, you get this phone call and, they ask you if you should die alone or with your family. And it struck me then at that moment, I actually went and talked to the family as well. And I spoke to various members of Hezbollah too about the issue. And it seemed that the man had gone to a meeting of municipalities. And then after that, as he comes back home, he picks up his phone and he gets the phone call, right? He had left the phone in one place. He had gone to a meeting and come back, and then he gets this phone call. And perhaps I'm not getting ahead of myself. But the point is that it really spoke to the level of surveillance we're seeing in Lebanon.
And you can watch the rest of that interview by becoming a member now and supporting Middle East Eye's reporting. For today, that is all that we have time for on MEE Live. To all of you watching, thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, make sure you're following us on social media at Middle East Eye. You can email meelive@middleeasteye.net. I'll be here live at 5 every Tuesday and Thursday, noon if you're in New York. See you then.